In 1985, Coca-Cola murdered its own legacy. They didn't fail, they staged an execution. While the world mourned a soda, the elite in Atlanta were pulling off the ultimate billionaire bait and switch. They spent millions to convince you they'd lost their minds, just so they could tighten their grip on your wallet. History calls it a blunder, I call it a heist. This is the 100 billion mistake. In the world of global dominance, there is no such thing as a mistake, only miscalculations. In 1985, the Coca-Cola Company controlled the most powerful cultural addiction on the planet. For 99 years, they held a monopoly on the American childhood. But even empires get paranoid. To the elite in Atlanta, the rising shadow of Pepsi wasn't just competition, it was an existential threat. They decided to do the unthinkable. They murdered their own king to make room for a pretender. They called it New Coke. History calls it a disaster. But if you look closer at the wreckage, you'll see it wasn't just a failure of taste, it was a cold-blooded pivot that nearly backfired into a corporate execution. By the early 80s, the cola wars had reached a fever pitch. Pepsi had weaponized psychology with the Pepsi Challenge, a simple blind taste test that proved a devastating point. When the brand is stripped away, people prefer sugar over heritage. Coca-Cola's market share was hemorrhaging. From a dominant 60%, they had shriveled to less than 24%. The boardrooms in Atlanta weren't filled with soda enthusiasts, they were filled with mathematicians who saw the end of their reign. They became obsessed with a single variable, the formula. They believed that if they could steal Pepsi's sweetness, they could reclaim the throne. They ignored the fact that people don't drink Coke for the flavor, they drink it for the memory. The plan was codenamed Project Kansas. It was the largest intelligence operation in consumer history. They spent $4 million, a fortune in 1985, testing 200,000 subjects. The data was a siren song. The new sweeter liquid didn't just beat Pepsi. It decimated the original Coke formula in every demographic. The executives were blinded by their own spreadsheets. On April 23, 1985, they stood before the world and announced that the original Coca-Cola was dead. They didn't just launch a new product, they attempted to delete a century of tradition. They thought they owned the brand. The backlash wasn't a protest, it was a riot. The company's headquarters were flooded with 8,000 calls a day. Not from customers, but from victims of a cultural robbery. People began hoarding old Coke like it was wartime rations. In the streets, new Coke was poured into sewers in public displays of defiance. But while the public screamed about taste, the real war was happening where the cameras couldn't see. The executives expected the anger to fade. They didn't expect the people who actually held the keys to the kingdom to turn on them.